Hi y'all, Jeff here with Jeff's Cars and Garage, and guess what? I'm not in my garage. I'm actually sitting down at my desk in my man cave, and you can probably see some of the background behind me. It's kind of got a little bit of a mess, but you know, from time to time I do videos talking about various different things, and I come across an article. Well, I've come across a couple articles, but I'm going to do this one. I'm going to cover here, talking about used cars, and as we're, we're in a tough times. We're in tough times right now, and people buying new cars. I mean, I think the new car market is probably going to fall off a little bit for a while, with the tariffs, imposed, and which is driving prices up, and so on and so forth. And so people, what a lot of people are going to do, at least middle income people are going to do, is actually purchase, try and purchase at least a decent used or pre-owned car, I guess is how we want to put it. I mean, but the problem, the problem is what do you look for, and how do you find, what are things to look for, and which models have this, that. Well, there's a lot of things that, depending on the miles that the manufacturer, requires, certain things to be changed at intervals. For example, I believe, and this has been maybe a few years back, I believe Hyundai used to, require on their engines to change the timing belt every, at 100,000 miles. And so, when you're looking at a used car, that would be one thing, to consider. What maintenance has been done, and should you get a pre-purchase inspection? In this article, it states that pre-purchase inspections are essentially a health checkup for your car, preferably performed by a trusted mechanic rather than a doctor. This idea is that they can detect any issues under the surface that your own modest once-over might have missed. The price can seem steep, but it might save you thousands of dollars in the long run. Now, let's talk about that for a second, because you may be buying this car from a dealer, and they'll say, "Yeah, we've done our 101 point inspection, and it all tests good." Really, did they really do that? So, a lot of times it's recommended that you actually take it to an outside, a third-party mechanic not associated with the dealer, if you can, and get a pre-purchase inspection. And some of the other things that it'll find out on that is, once the car is put up in the air and inspected underneath it, you could tell if it's been wrecked and things like that, because a lot of times, an accident can take place on a vehicle, but it never be reported to the insurance company. Therefore, it won't end up on Carfax. So that is a buyer beware kind of thing. And in a lot of cases, that pre-purchase inspection is probably going to, it'll set you back anywhere from, 200 to probably $500, depending on how involved you want to go with it. So I probably, if you can afford it, that'd be something to look at, unless you know what you're looking for. Uh, Fuel economy. We all know that, bigger vehicles typically aren't going to get near near the fuel economy as a smaller vehicle. And if you're looking for fuel economy, then I'd probably stay away from Suburbans and Tahoes and Navigators and older Hummers and things like that, because you're not going to get that fuel economy. And I believe that the fuel prices are, they're always going to go up, but right now in our economy and the uncertainties of things, fuel prices are going to go this. They're just going to go up and down. And so, if you're on a budget, you may consider something with a little bit better, a little bit smaller version of that. This article had ignoring timing belt replacement. Yeah, you don't want to ignore it. If you're looking at purchasing a 50, 60,000 mile vehicle that's, 5 or 6 years old, and the man, check with look at the owner's manual. Usually you're going to find the owner's manual still stuffed in the glove compartment. Look at the scheduled maintenance, or, if you're buying that vehicle from the dealer that is the new car dealer, talk to them about what are the major service intervals that need to, or service recommendations that need to be taken under consideration over the next, 2 or 3 years. And you're going to have to calculate that in there. Otherwise, if you have a failure, you might want to consider a third-party warranty, extended service contract or service warranty in addition to that. So you got to calculate and budget all that in. The northern states, you're going to have this in a lot of cases, suspension issues. You get a vehicle that's 50, 60, 70,000 miles on it, and those are times, especially in states where you have a lot of road grime and salt and so on and so forth, suspension parts, the steering parts are going to wear out, or they're going to wear out prematurely, so to speak, because, all that stuff takes a beating from the roads. And in the northern states, you got potholes that you got to deal with during the winter and shortly after the winter months until they get filled back in. So part of your pre-purchase inspection should include looking at suspension parts. Now, this article stated something about electrical gremlins and things like that. If you're looking at the car and you're test driving it and it's already has things acting up, probably be a good idea to stay away from it. Electrical gremlins are going to be a common thing, especially with all the parts and pieces that actually, everything is electronically controlled. I mean, the average car now has seven different types of computer modules built into that car that control sensors and things that help that car operate. So it's not like the old cars. You had an ECU, an electronic control unit, and that covered everything, from the 90s. Now you have at least 7 of them, and sometimes in more of the high-end luxury cars, you got 12 or 14 of them, and so they all have to talk to each other and things like that. So electrical gremlins are one thing to watch out for, but would I get all too concerned over that? I don't know, but if you're going to go and purchase a extended warranty, make sure it covers that. One of the things that this is to look out for as well when you're buying a used car, and it depends on the year of the car or how old the car is. You know, a car typically a vehicle 5 to 7 or 8 years old, you know, with 70 to 100,000 miles on it, has probably had a lot of service, you know, or had a lot of things already done, you would think. And typically a car, you know, let's go back to my GL 350, that diesel. You know, it's a 2015. It is now 10 years old, with just over 120,000 miles on it. It had all of its maintenance because I was able to acquire that from the dealer, and they were very happy to help me with that. A lot of dealers, if you don't know where it came from, may not be able to help you with that. But you know, they were happy to, you know, accommodate me with all of that. But yet again, they missed, you know, diagnosing something that the previous owner had taken it in there. And so, one of the things that you can certainly look out for is, you know, the condition of the vehicle. You know, if the headlights are already fogged over or faded over, and you know, of course the dealer, it's up to them to you know, kind of detail the vehicle out. But a lot of times you can catch some things and some oxidation and things like that when opening up the hood, looking in door jambs and things like that, because sometimes the whoever's detailing it doesn't, you know, go that in depth on that. So you know, just some advice when looking at looking at a car. Now, something else that I probably would not purchase a car if it had a check engine light. At least at the point where, at least if it had a check engine light, at least if I knew what it was. Now, you're going to see, you know, if you're out there buying a car that's a slightly older off of Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or, you know, private party, you know, things like that, and they say, yeah, it's a check engine light, just needs an O2 sensor, and you should be good to go. Don't believe it. Unless you've got a code reader that can actually read it and you pull the codes so that you are aware of what that is. And quite frankly, you can Google that code, and then on that make and model of car, get an estimate of exactly what it's going to cost to fix that. So that's a kind of a helpful hint there. But check engine lights definitely would be something I'd be cautious of. This article also mentioned out-of-date transmission fluid. Okay, I'm going to kind of, you know, out-of-date transmission fluid. If the car is 15 or 20 years old, yeah, the transmission fluid is probably out of date if it's got 150 or 175,000 miles on it. Today, modern cars, you know, in the last 8 to 10 years, a lot of them have sealed transmission bodies. You can't even check the fluid. You know, it takes a special shop to, you know, to flush the fluid through, and I think they do it through, you know, through the transmission cooling lines or something of that nature. So you're not even going to know. But buyer beware. Yeah, when you get to a vehicle that does have 150,000 miles, and that transmission fluid hasn't been flushed or changed, yeah, then you're gonna have a little costly repair. This is a good one on this article that I read. Aftermarket mods gone wrong. Now, I live in the Midwest, and folks, what's the one thing the young men and even ladies out here like to do is they like to buy pickups. And they like to buy diesel pickups, and they like to lift them, and they put the big tires on them, and they put the big bell exhaust pipes on them, and things like that. And there are some car lots, used car lots, that you know, I know of one right offhand that, you know, their buyer will buy those kinds of things because they think that it's attracting the kids. Folks, I wouldn't trust any vehicle with modifications on it on a car lot at all. That's my opinion. Because, and number one reason is, you don't know if it was professionally done. Number two, if it was professionally done, did all the parts match up correctly? And if you did everything join or fit together? One of the things, you get a lifted four-wheel drive pickup, like a Ford F-250 that's got a 4-inch suspension lift and a 2-inch body lift. Did everything match up? Because now you have your drive shaft angles are different. Did they go the extra mile on that? Were they branded parts, or were they parts that came from China? Whatever the case may be, first of all, it's not even been done according to any Ford specifications, because it's not even, I'm sure Ford doesn't, unless they're doing a Raptor or something, they're not recommending you go and modify that F-250 truck like that. So, those things, those are big flags. If that's what you want, then great. But, I've been in the Midwest, and these young people, and I want to say kids, they are lifting these trucks, and they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars. But is it really done right? That's the big question. Another thing, and this is not a big turnoff to me, as long as you can get them. When you're buying a used car, one of the things that a lot of people say, and this article says, make sure it's got maintenance records. Well, folks, you ain't gonna find maintenance records in the glove box of that car. When that car's traded in or it comes through the auction, everything is cleaned out. So now, how do you get the maintenance records? Well, you can do a Carfax on it, and you can see the history of some of the service records on it. But a lot of times you can't, because if it's been at an independent dealer that does not have access to the national system, then you're not going to know what maintenance and things are done. Now, if you're buying a used car at a new car dealership, and they say, well, yeah, it was traded in here. It was bought here originally. It was traded back in here. The couple, and my dad, when my dad was, my parents were alive, he would go to the same dealer to buy the cars. Well, because I introduced him to a salesman there back when I was in high school, because I happened to know him. And I said, I really like this guy. And Dad, I said, if you want to trade cars, that's probably the guy I would go. I think he's very honest. And sure enough, he was. And so my dad would buy, he would buy back when I was in elementary school, he bought a driver's ed car. It was put out for driver's ed for 2,000 miles, brought back in, and, it was discounted. My dad bought dealer demos and things like that, but because it had the service records on it. And so my advice is, if that's if you're really concerned about what's been done on the car over its time, then buy a used car that has been traded in at a new car store. For example, if you're looking for a Buick, go to a Buick dealership and say, okay, I'm looking for, I want an 8-year-old, whatever Buick Encore. If they have one on the lot, chances are it was purchased there. Sad part about it is, though, once you get about past 10 years old, dealers, and you get up close to 90, 100,000 miles, new car dealerships, they ship those things right off to the used car auctions, and they just end up over who knows where. Seals and gaskets, your pre-inspection purchase should include that, at least looking around. A lot of times, your dealer lots or your used car dealers are asphalt, so you can't see if the darn thing's leaking any oil or anything. But one thing you can do is, let the car sit there and run. After you drive it, you get back, you open the hood, you take some smells. If it smells odd, chances are there's a problem. So, you know, that again is, leaky seals and gaskets. You're typically going to find that on older cars, but you can get, once you get past 10 years old, you can still have some issues on that. The rest, is on this list, battery and alternator issues, emissions failure, that's going to go back to check engine lights, hidden accident damage. I talked about that. A pre-purchase inspection would, kind of determine that, at least because you're getting the car up in the air and you're actually looking underneath it to see any bent metal or anything like that. Because, cars today, the newer model cars today, you just take off parts and bolt them back on. Half of it's plastic. And so it's kind of easy to cover up some of that stuff. In the old days, you had to bend metal, and then you could do the knocking test or the magnet test to see if they filled it in with Mondo. The only other thing that I would be cautious of, especially if you're getting older cars and you don't want to spend a lot of money, some of the odd cars, if you don't see them a lot, no, it's a cute looking car or it's a good looking car, is parts availability. And in our times right now, parts are going to be a problem because a lot of your your OEM parts are imported from someplace. It doesn't matter what manufacturer you're getting your car is. Ford uses parts that are made in Mexico. They have parts that are made in Canada. GM, same thing. Mercedes-Benz, you think it's a German automobile? Excuse me. And the parts are probably made in Germany? No, because it's a if the vehicle is made in Alabama in that plant, some of the parts are made in the United States. Some of them are made in Mexico. Their parts are made everywhere, shipped in and assembled together. Today the car manufacturers are really car assembly plants because they take parts and they just put them together. They come down conveyors. They're assigned. Everything is strategically done, and everything, it just ends up right there where the car is, and then the person or the robot, depending on the manufacturer, assembly plant, is just assembling them together. The same thing with airplane manufacturers and things like that. Nobody is actually hand stamping or hand building a car today. It's all done by robots, and it's all it's kind of all done by machines. So be careful of what you're spending your money on, because if you don't do a little research, you could end up with a very high costly repair bill in the future when buying that pre-owned car. My personal recommendation is I probably wouldn't buy one more than 10 years old unless you are a mechanic of some sort that can work on your own vehicle. Hope this is helpful information. Sometimes I like to put out these informative videos, and I've got a couple more that I'm going to do. So I hope hope that you like it, and put your comments down below. If you have any topics you'd like for me to discuss, put that in the comments down below as well. Hit subscribe if you haven't. Share this with your friends. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.